Hey, Peter, thanks for coming on our Leaders Who Care series.
Glad to be here, Mark. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, shout out to Stephen Hecht for introducing us, doing the great work that he does, talking about a crazy world. There's what he does, hopefully can help change that world with the non-flict program, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But great place to start, Peter. If you would briefly introduce yourself, you, where you are, where you're from, your family, something you've never told anybody else in the world. You want to make this the time you tell them, things like that.
Okay, just get real vulnerable real fast. My name is Peter Slough, and I currently live in the Bay Area, just north of San Francisco. I was raised originally in Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, of all places. Made it out to the West Coast after I graduated college back in '91, which seems like forever ago at this point. Yeah. Really kind of got into the real estate field early. I got my real estate sales license when I was 18, just for the fun of it. Came from a very deep sort of family business background. We can talk about that a little more in a bit, but made my way to the West Coast and went from a sales and mortgage sort of first jobs out of school in the real estate market, and then ultimately hopped the fence over to the commercial arena, where I was a commercial lender for GMAC Commercial Mortgage back when they had a lending division. And then ultimately in 2005, I hopped another fence from being a service provider of debt and equity to real estate developers to actually starting to buy some deals of my own with investors behind me. So that was sort of the launch in 2005 to get into the multifamily acquisition, renovation, value add kind of business model that started the whole thing that we are today. Today we're based in Denver with an office in Tahoe, Truckee, and I kind of float between the Marin, Truckee, and Denver offices. And we've got an amazing team. And honestly, we grew from 1 or 2 deals to about $1.5 billion portfolio of multifamily assets that used to be Western states focused, and now we're all across the country. We're in Nashville and Michigan and next to Purdue University, and continuing to kind of march east from the West Coast. So it's been a wild ride, and we'll get into some of the nuances of what's made it interesting as we kind of unpack this discussion.
So you remind me of Jay, I think it was Jay Leno or Johnny Carson with Robin Williams, and all he had to do was say, "Hey, Robin," and that was it. It's just like, bam. But that was well done. That was well done. What about family? Tell me about your family.
Yeah, so I've got 2 beautiful daughters. One recently graduated from CU Boulder. She's desperately seeking a job and wanting to find her purpose and place in the world. And then I've got a younger daughter who's at the New School in New York City, and she's into fashion journalism. So she's a junior-ish because of COVID, and she'll do a little catching up next summer, and she'll be a senior next year, and then we'll see where she ends up. I would love to get her back towards this part of the continent, but she loves New York, and we'll see where that ends for her or heads for her.
Yeah, it'll work out. I have 3 boys, and one of them was in New York, and when we moved from Florida here, and then he joined us here also. So I got my 3 boys in California, but it took a little journeying to get there.
Takes a while, right?
So I got to ask you, so when you were a kid, did you have an interest in buildings, or did you play with Legos or blocks, or did you organize, teams and groups and on the street? Like we used to play street hockey, organizing teams. So, or did you actually look at buildings and say, well, that's a pretty cool building? And so when did you start having your why, if you will?
Yeah. Well, the whys come in phases, right? It was more what to begin with and versus why. I think you mature into the why eventually, hopefully, if you are thoughtful. Actually, I spent my teenage years running a landscaping company, and I cut all the lawns of a bunch of developments that my father had built. And again, I came from a real estate background, so he's in sales, title, mortgage, and development. And interestingly, his mother started the business in the early 50s. She was kind of a pioneer. professional woman in her day and a hard worker and a pretty tough woman. She's pretty inspirational for me. But actually I would watch these cornfields in Pennsylvania go from beautiful landscape into condos and townhomes. And I quite honestly didn't love the idea of new build. And that was, sort of bread and butter for my dad. And I always joked with him, I'm like, hey, that was a really great playground. That was a place we would go camping or four-wheeling. And he's like, well, if I don't do it, somebody else will, and I'm going to do it better than they did. So he had his own rationale behind it. And of course he was trying to survive and make a living. And we had a difference of philosophy for the first time. I just never loved the idea of new build ground up development. And true to form, we've only ever bought existing product and made it nicer. So to some extent, I loved real estate because I kind of was born and raised in it, but I was more interested in improving the assets than taking, fresh rural land and turning it into more density. That's it. That's an honest answer.
The field of dreams would have never been.
I know. Somebody's got to develop, right? I'm just not the guy.
I guess so. So it's interesting about your mom. One of our clients is the National Women's History Museum.
It was my grandmother.
And they, they're bringing to light now all the women that have been pioneers in history and that have not written in the history books.
Yeah. No, this was not my mother. It was my grandmother. Pretty interesting.
My grandmother. Okay.
Yeah. Even earlier.
Even more so. And back in that day, for sure. And so they're unveiling some really, really amazing stuff. So you started talking about your journey, in the real estate industry and research and financials and all the ups and downs that we all go through. And sometimes you wonder, is that home really worth $10 gazillion?
Sure.
Or what? So what changed for you and your overall business model then after the 2009 downturn?
Yeah. So when I jumped the fence, as I mentioned, into investment into multifamily, which our demographic is very much workforce housing, blue collar sort of income levels or lower. I was trained classically as a lender. I knew the business via spreadsheets. I knew how to underwrite past historical NOI, net operating income, and cash flows and whatnot so that we could make loans on these properties. And so I entered, like most other folks enter the business where the idea is you buy low and you sell high and you make a profit and you move on from there and try and do your next one. And what really kind of transformed my directional path was 2008, 2009. And the economy it hit the skids and jobs were scarce. And we had 2 or 3 deals in Salt Lake City at the time. And the vibe at these properties couldn't have been lower. People were struggling, residents were struggling. And yes, we were staying full, but rents were flat, if not declining. And everybody was just in survival mode. And so with the basic walking around these properties back then, with the basic notion of, man, what do we do to help? Because we are all involved in this business model. This is not just a spreadsheet anymore. These are people's lives. And so with the simple question of what do we do to help, knowing that if the residents were struggling, then the investors were going to struggle, and the whole thesis was fragile. We really kind of dug into that question, like, what do we do to help? And so went on a bit of a vision quest, if you will, thought process, walking around the buildings and just kind of listening and learning and talking to residents, and was fortunate enough to meet another gentleman in Marin County, which is north of San Francisco, where he had kind of set up this networking hub for a town in Marin County where the local residents, they all collaborated, they all helped each other out. It was a little, it was a bit California sort of communal mindset, but there's a lot of good stuff we can learn from the village, so to speak. And I talked to him, met with him, and said, hey, we have these properties where we've got, 200 to 1,000 people living at any one of them, and nobody behaves like a community. They're sharing walls, but they're not sharing lives. And so how do we sort of tap that call it human capital, if you will, and really kind of create more of a community, a sense of community? And I think the word community gets overused so often, and it's such a generic, bland universal word, but there's so much power in the word, in the concept of community. And you think about whether it's your school or your job, your work culture, where you live, you know, we're way stronger as a group than we are individually, of course. And so I sort of launched this grand social experiment with this guy in tow. He was a bit of a consultant for me at that point. And we said, what if we experiment and just introduce this concept of what we later named as Urban Village? And what if we just sort of create the space, provide a little bit of food, maybe outfit the common areas a little bit better, that's make it more suitable for people to gather. And then amazingly, we stood back, and 9 months later, the amount of resident-led events that came from that simple sort of shift of how we looked at the property, all of a sudden this property came to life. And residents were doing things like community gardens, book clubs, workout groups, job networking, babysitting, and they were behaving like a neighborhood. They were behaving like a community for the first time. And I'll never forget, I came on site at the property. This was actually in Provo, Utah. It was the first, our pilot program. And there were flowers hanging from every doorstep in the eve of each unit. It was 115 units. And I walked in, 3-story building. I walked into the manager's office. I said, who approved the flowers? Like, you know, this is a mystery. And she said to me, she goes, no, Peter, the residents are actually competing for the best front door right now. And they are providing the flowers in all their other units. And I was just blown away, because this was not the typical behavior you would see from a blue collar, not that we had a pool, but we used a unit for a little clubhouse, but there wasn't a whole lot. There weren't fitness rooms, there weren't computer centers, anything like that. I mean, it was pretty de-amenitized, if you will. Now apartments have gotten so fancy with some of their offerings, it's kind of crazy. But it was a really, really uplifting moment where I was like, wow, there is a very different dimension to this property and the residents who live here. And lo and behold, during the downturn, when rents were flat, jobs were scarce, this one property was gushing cash. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me what was working. So we dug into the numbers a little bit. And it wasn't that the top line had moved at all. It was because the bottom line was shrinking. And what I mean by that is that classically in apartment living or apartment ownership, you're going to see 65% turnover each year. So lots of paint, lots of carpet, lots of countertops, lots of appliances, all that stuff gets swapped out when somebody leaves. And what we had was 100% occupied property and nobody was leaving. And we had a wait list for months. So we were onto something accidentally. We had no financial agenda to try and make more money on this deal. All we wanted to do was help. And where the power of the community really came into play was when residents really liked where they lived and they felt like they had a sense of connection. And so that was kind of a big aha moment for me. It was a big aha moment for our company. And I think that's how we discovered our ultimate why.
Yeah, it's actually brilliant. You know, we got started, Fifth Element got started on the premise, we launched on the premise that leaders in business can do way better when they're doing good at the same time.
Sure.
And it took decades for us to get through that to somebody's heads before we even launched this.
Right.
And you're really showing that creating communities is good for the economic, social, and environmental even.
Yeah.
Impact, through the tenant engagement. And it leads me to a little bit about both the tenant engagement, because you're making it now theirs, they're making it theirs. And if it's yours versus someone else's, you're not going to take care of it. Like a rental car, you might take care of it, but not the same as your own type of thing. Right. Now, we also work with clients on well-being and how it impacts every aspect of people. And I'm sure you've heard of blue zones. You know,
I have.
And that's where people are happier and healthier. And it's all about, like you're saying, where they've got a community, they're together, they're doing stuff, and they say that the thing that fills people's hearts and souls more than anything is belonging.
Right.
To me, it sounds like that's what you've created, that the blue zone, the belonging, and less arguments, less everything, right?
Yeah, well, there were some arguments along the way, of course, because people are a little bit messy.
Less, not none.
Yeah, not none. Well, it's interesting because we didn't create it; we stumbled into it, and the residents really created it, which was pretty rewarding. And but we didn't know what ESG was. We didn't know what impact was. we'd heard of conscious capital, we'd heard of, different catchphrases out there, but we didn't really know how to apply to our industry at all. I mean, nobody taught this stuff, at least along my trajectory. It was all about the spreadsheets, it's all buy low, sell high, and, turn and burn and desktop underwriting, and no real connection as a landlord, or what we now call ourselves stewards of these properties. Like, we have this moral obligation almost to do well by our residents because of what a meaningful investment vehicle it is, and because of how lucky we are to be, able to help in some way. So I take it very seriously in terms of our role in the industry. And I think we'll get into a little bit more, but there's so much that can be done if we all collaborate from an industry basis and really swap notes and get into open sourcing solutions, because the list of social and environmental challenges are endless, right? So it's an opportunity that we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg at this point.
Well, you mentioned, we've got clients in real estate industry, but also clients like an ILG or whatnot that provides cabinets and countertops and this and that and whatnot.
Right.
And you don't necessarily have to be a rocket scientist to realize that if the tenants are taking care of it and you're not leaving, then you don't have to, you said, buy new carpets, new appliances, new this and that and everything else. That's real economic benefit.
Real economic benefit, and couldn't agree more. There's other things we've gotten into as well, as far as LED lighting, which is a no-brainer. I mean, that's just, technology comes at us now, which is good. We don't have to figure it all out. Water savings are huge. We've got some amazing stats where we're saving millions and millions of gallons of water each year because of low flow plumbing and fixtures, and that equates to Olympic-sized swimming pools at each property of water we've saved each year annually, given where we've gone with it. So yeah, the environmental side is hugely important. I think it's more off the shelf these days, where again, technology comes at you and you just adopt as an operator. It's kind of a no-brainer, as I mentioned. The social side gets much messier, of course, but it's so worthwhile. And we went from being very scrappy to disorganized to now we've got a full-time dedicated team that does nothing but focus on the impact experience for the social side of our residents. And we've learned that our little portfolio, mid-sized portfolio, compared to some of the big 800-pound gorilla players that are out there, all we can do is set an example and share that information. Where the magic and the scale really occurs is going to be when we all share notes and all the big players get involved too, which is actually happening, which is great.
It's not like he's my best friend, but I've had a couple conversations with Richard Branson, and the word pride came up. We were talking about how come people don't say they're proud of where they work anymore, was the conversation. Whereas I remember, it's different eras, but I remember when adults, when I was a kid, would say, I'm proud of my company, I'm proud of this, proud of that, where I work. It was never perfect, but we heard it more. Workplace environment is another thing that we talk a lot about.
Yeah.
Workplace environment is very often now in your home too.
Right.
And so I could see what you're talking about, where people do want to be proud of their home.
Mm-hmm.
And if they work there too, then you want to work in a place that feels good, helps you work better, it's healthy and all that. It seems like, what were we doing for 5 decades or 6 decades, not thinking about that?
I don't know.
And being proud of where you work. I mean, versus the apartment building that's really run down and says luxury apartments here or something like that.
Right.
So, what's your thoughts of them? I would assume your tenants are proud of where they live and sometimes even work now.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's tough to please everybody. So we know it's a bit of a numbers game, and we want to just provide the best possible leadership we can. But there's no question that resident engagement gets everybody. It's contagious. And all of a sudden you do start to hear these stories and see, there might've been a senior living in their apartment for years and nobody bothered to ask, what are you good at? What do you have to offer? Like, what are you into? And all of a sudden, a little old lady is hosting a cooking class and is now like the star of the property because she shared her banana bread recipe or something. Like it's the little stuff that connects us where the real magic occurs. And then, so what's been really phenomenal and sort of surprising from our programming is that it's mostly resident led. We really don't want to think that we know best or top down approach to how and what they spend their time on. And that's what makes our model transportable from market to market across the country as we get into all the political challenges and the diversification and the non-diversification, all the stuff that goes on out there that is tough socially. This program works no matter what state or county we're talking about, because everybody's going to sort of gravitate towards their comfort level, and so that avails itself to being an open format rather than some closed one-way street that either you're in or you're out type of thing. It just allows for flexibility, and it what works in Dallas doesn't necessarily work in Vegas, and what works in Vegas doesn't necessarily work in Nashville. And so, but the overall framework and the idea that you're going to allow for self-population or resident-led events to deliver their own content is really kind of what helps us scale and move across, because from there, we're just trying to organize events and keep everybody sort of reporting and capture the information that comes out of it. So I'm really, I fought with my stepfather long and hard in the early days. He's like, well, that may work in Utah, but it'll never work in Pennsylvania because blah, blah, blah. I'm like, actually, we've now, and he loves it because I come back to him when we enter a new market, and I tell him, hey, we've got another flag on the map, and it's working there too. So he loves that, which is great.
Sweet, it's just sweet coming back like that. It's it is different in different places, but even like the blue zones, there's blue zones in totally different cultures around the world.
Yeah.
It still comes down to the foundation of what you're talking about, the community, and you said the word neighborhood, which is a great word because it really is help your neighbor, leaders who care, if you will.
Yeah.
That people are looking for. And we talked about the world right now being crazy. People are craving that now, actually.
I know. Even more so, right? I mean, we all just want to get back to simple. Why can't we stop having these angry discussions out there? Let's just recognize the beauty in each of us, basically.
Yeah, you get in the elevator and you say hello to Rocky the dog and Jim the owner and whatever, and it's cool, right? So,
it's the village. We've lost our way a lot in some ways culturally, and I think getting back to basics is really helpful, and it's very easy to understand. How tricked out we get with it is to be seen. I mean, obviously we've been at it now for 13 years or so plus. We're now part of a multifamily impact council led by Bob Simpson, and he's been able to get a lot of big institutional names signed up. We're probably the smallest operator within their roster, but we're one of the biggest voices because we've been at it for so long. And again, we didn't know what we were doing. We stumbled into this whole thing, and it just felt good. It felt right. It felt like the right way to be a steward and to be a leader and to look after something that wasn't bricks and mortar. It was actually people's lives, families' lives, all that kind of stuff. So again, we just sort of followed our hearts into this whole path, and we did not know what these acronyms were. We did not have a financial agenda, and honestly, it's made capital raising so much easier for us because investors get it. They understand what we're up to. They understand why we're doing it, and it's not mutually exclusive to investor returns either. Like, you get to have your cake and eat it too. There are a ton of great nonprofits out there, but this is a perfect fit for capital that wants to earn a return, wants to do the right thing, but isn't sure how to check those boxes. And so there's a lot of scrambling going on with family offices, institutional investment banks. They all want to check the impact box these days because of social pressure, which is great. But capital wants to do the right thing, whether it's because they're feeling corporate guilt or whether because they truly believe it. I don't care which it is. We want to put that capital to work because we can do more good out there with aligned capital than without it. So, and I think that's really where the scale comes from, as larger institutions really sort of understand the reality and the realization that no, this doesn't have to be a nonprofit environment. This can actually be a profitable business thesis.
If this doesn't work out for you, you could join Fifth Element. We'd be happy to have you.
Okay. Thanks for that.
No problem. Because that's exactly what we're espousing, to people.
Okay.
You can't have that. You can make better in business. You can have the better economic benefit by doing right. And you say you didn't know what you were doing, but you kind of did, because how can I help you is a great line that people appreciate. And
Sure.
your best champions, your best salespeople, your best everything are the tenants over there to
Right.
saying how great it is a place to live. And when
Yeah.
you're doing that, not to do a speech, but when you're doing that, you're affecting the health and well-being of people.
Yeah.
People notice that they
Right.
perform better, they act better in their community.
Sure.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of not
Yeah.
trickle down stuff that happens. So I'm assuming, not to put words in your mouth, you kind of touched on it. That's why you think it's really a moral obligation to make an impact as an industry.
Yeah, this is basically a call to action for the industry because the two-dimensional thinking spreadsheet models they need to be tossed out the window or thrown in the trash. It's just, there's too much opportunity. If we really want to see impact in this country or anywhere else, this is a great avenue to get that done because we're gonna basically bump into what 43 million renter households across the country. Can't speak for the home ownership demographic in terms of how to impact those folks, but we've got a half the population that rents, give or take, and that's a pretty big audience and a lot of work to do. And it's actually real work. It's not bureaucratic. It's not sort of inefficient. There's actually, and what part of our secret to success has been learning to really channel resources outside each property and each market and bring goods and services in. We can't do it all. We couldn't possibly be providing health and medical or ride sharing or recycling or food bank, food support, all that stuff, wellness, education. So we look to the nonprofits to partner with and really bring that expertise to bear at our properties. And what's kind of fun that's happening now is that we're starting to see some properties become a broader neighborhood hub to the rest of the surrounding community where we have police and fire in to educate. And we talk about safety, or we have rolling dentists, mobile dentists that come on site. And it's not just serving our residents, we're offering it up, or we've got mentorship programs happening. And then the fun stuff, we do bees and chickens and gardens and all kinds of stuff landlords typically don't do, but we like to be a little weird, and that's part of our philosophy and do things differently. And it's been fun not having to answer to a rigid set of institutional, show us your metrics and show us this. Now we've gotten very good at reporting over the last 13 years, trust me, because early on it was just narrative and quarterly investor updates. But now we're measuring stuff with real technology and seeing, how different programming works and resident engagement and leadership opportunities and resume builders and how do those resumes lead to jobs. We're starting to track all this stuff because we do want to run institutionally. We just never want to be an institution. So we've learned to get smart with our data. And that's recent. That's over the last 2 or 3 years because it's taken a while. But back in the day, how do you measure a smile? Hard to sort of quantify a happy resident other than they stick around a little bit longer. But I think the hospitality industry has a lot to borrow from because they are very interested in the customer experience in order to retain those customers and see them come back again. Well, guess what? So are we. It's good for business to stay full. It's good for business to keep residents happy and to really provide opportunities they never would have seen. And that's, there's a lot to be learned from other industries out there. And I think hotels do it extremely well if they build a brand.
Well, I tell you, we do a lot of searches, and some of my best clients ask me to bring people in from other industries to get different perspectives. Just on that point. And it does flow into the community, and things like crime and health and everything does get changed, and stats show it. So with respect to, again, well-being, I guess, and community, I know you and your team had some interesting experiences, hopefully positive impact, I believe, from engaging in non-flict with that nonprofit. Can you tell us about that? How was that experience?
Well, there's really two parts to our business. One is the real estate company, OpenPath, that owns the assets with investors. But the other, which is almost a more exciting venture for me at this point, is that we started property management based in Denver. And so we started a property management company just for our own portfolio, took it in-house 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And the initial year was a little rocky. We were getting our hands around a lot and trying to figure out how to transition, but we've got it dialed now. And I think the real opportunity there is, and I'll get to your non-flict question in a second. The real opportunity there is we now are picking up third-party business from other operators who love our story, love the way we run a property, also want to check the boxes on impact socially, environmentally. They're not sure how to do it. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for us to migrate the story away from the real estate company itself and into the property management brand. So we're in a rebranding process right now. It's called New Earth Residential. It used to be called UV Residential. And it's really about embodying, what the new way or paradigm could be within a property management business, which was even more guilty of being tyrants in the business. So we're the good guys trying to do the right thing for our residents for all the right reasons. And so when we connected on the non-flick subject, the real estate side, Open Path, we had some conflict with another partner that actually helped run our Purdue University student housing deals. And we just didn't know, and we used the non-flick sort of methodology to basically put ourselves in their shoes. Like what are they dealing with on their side?
Right.
So we stepped through that. We used a case study, live example within our own business, and we worked out a solution. We approached our partner in West Lafayette, where Purdue University is, and we said, "Hey, we've been thinking about these repairs we had in mind and our approach to it, and we never stopped to think about what your shoes are, being in the market and being one of the biggest student housing managers in that market." And so once we figured out that, no, you're up against the reality of it, we're just back here like being ideological about how to fix something. And it just really resolved things very quickly between us. But our whole team, having gone through that process without the conflict partner part of it, we just put ourselves in their shoes. And that taught us as a business, like, oh, we need to stop and think about the other side and co-create a solution that's mutually beneficial for both sides. So long story short, I think that now that we embody that in the real estate side, we're going to take that over to the property management side, where they're dealing hand-to-hand combat every day with residents, with day-to-day lives and challenges and what goes on. And so what we sort of failed to see was, hey, the on-site managers and the maintenance personnel, they have their hands full on a daily basis. And we need to put ourselves in their shoes, and we need to teach them to put themselves in the residents' shoes. And so there's a whole sort of cascading effect of how non-flick can really, really, if you nail it at the top level and push it down through the entire culture, it can be a powerful mover as to how you run a business and how you interface with your customers.
Right on is all I can say. Because full disclosure, I'm on the board of Million Peacemakers, and we recommend it to our clients now. Conflict as part of well-being, even.
Right.
And it's also not rocket science, but you have to have a process that people can follow. And so I'm to use Branson's words, I'm proud of you guys, because I'm hoping one day I'll see you on national TV, talking about non-flick or something, because gosh darn, we need that type of thing happening right now.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm guilty. I'm human like everybody else. I've got my my way of being a person in the world, but I'm trying to improve all the way around, no matter what. And I can have a bit of influence in the industry because of the opportunity that's in front of us. And again, we just want to set an example.
And it goes down when you go home. I'll just ask you one last question on this part here. When you go home, or when anybody goes home, the kids see how you are and how you're feeling and how you're reacting to your work. So it and if that's negative or positive, they get it. And if more people can go home saying, "Man, you should hear what I did. It was amazing. You should hear what we're doing in the community. That was so cool." And the kids are thinking, "Well, this is good stuff," or "Work sucks. I never want to do it." One of the two. And again, it goes down to the community again. And so good for you for doing that. So last question on this part is, I had a client tell me in 2021 about 2020. He told, now it seems like God knows how far away before. He said, 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought it was a great way of saying it. But now 21 and 22 have literally flown by. What are you most grateful for with that? And what are you most hopeful for in the future?
All right. Well, so I'm very grateful that as a business and an industry, we did seem to sail through COVID. That was a big undertaking, trying to keep residents and personnel healthy, safe, and productive. So I'm grateful that we were able to do that. It actually spurred a lot of deep dive analysis on our portfolio and made us much smarter in terms of, you know, if this thing goes to zero or people rents go to 50%, like we did some worst case scenario metric stress testing. And that actually shaped us up as a firm with way more knowledge and power in terms of like, okay, what can we, how far can it drop before we're in real trouble? Thankfully, we planned for the worst, hoped for the best, and found ourselves somewhere in the middle. But it also gave us a lot of time because we weren't buying deals to really kind of dial get our impact even tighter. And it actually brought our team together way more because we really rallied behind our mission and really solidified our why as a culture. And that includes the property management company as well. So I'm really grateful for surviving that, having the time to really slow down and be conscious and thoughtful about who we wanted to be and how we wanted to be in the world.
Right.
As far as next year or the end of 2022, I'm cautiously cautious about what's going on in the financial markets. You know, multifamily is a great asset class. Property management is always going to be needed up and down. And so it's not, we just want to make sure that we are smart about our decisions from a buying standpoint, new acquisition standpoint. But I also think it's kind of time to put the pencils down on new acquisitions for the moment and see where all this goes, see where we can kind of feel the bottom or get some stability back in the financial markets. But I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity for our property management division to really tout the brand and the impact message and carry the flag and really, really shout to the world, hey, this stuff works and it's like, it's good for everybody. This is not some sales gimmick. Like, this is the way we should run a property, and this is the way we should treat residents. And now that we're getting into third-party business where it's not open path anymore, we're almost becoming the smaller client, which is the goal. It's really encouraging to me that other leaders and operators, landlords want to participate at this level and see how important resident resiliency is to their business model. And whether it's selfish or altruistic, it doesn't really matter. I just like knowing that we're going to leave a wide swath of goodness in our rearview mirror and feel really good about it. And honestly, I am seeing the industry leaders like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae or Blackstone or Comunidad, or, you know, name some of these bigger players that are out there. They're starting to do the right thing. And I'm glad to be, you know, open source and just be a part of the conversation. It's been really rewarding for us to kind of, I don't think recognition is what we're after. I think it's just validation of what we're on to that is starting to be meaningful to others as well. So I think it's a fun time to be in the industry, and I'm really proud to be a part of an industry that wants to shift. I don't know how you change some of these other larger industries out there in quite the way that we can do. What's at, you know, kind of what's at our fingertips here is pretty phenomenal.
Well, I'll tell you how they shift. They do it the same way you do. You're leaders who care, and that's
Right.
how they're shifting. And
Yep.
you know, they realize that that's almost what they have to do, and they are. So good for you for leading the way. And I tell you, during bad times, that's when you can make the most impact for clients and customers, because they remember.
Yeah.
Basically. And
Yeah.
so and that's when the real leaders come through. Anybody can be, you know, good attitude when things are going great.
Yeah.
But that's when you bring it. So hey, thanks for being a leader who cares. That's first what I'm going to say. And thanks for
Sure.
joining us on this series. That's super insights, and makes me feel a lot more positive that things are going in the right direction.
Really grateful to share the story. It's been good for us as well. Thank you.